We want to bring to you ideas on this programme, and a new think tank gets up and running next month with the aim of giving Islam a British makeover. In the wake, of terror attacks in the UK and angry protests outside schools that are teaching LGBT awareness, the Oxford Institute for British Islam says it will oppose extremism, Sharia law and the wearing of the burqa. The Institute says British Islam is not beholden to, nor is it subject to, medieval interpretations, patriarchal oppression, political authoritarianism, cultural baggage, tribal customs and bygone practices from distant ancestral homelands. Let's now talk to Dr. Taj Hargey, who's the director of the Oxford Institute for British Islam. He's also the Imam of the Oxford Islamic Congregation. Good morning.
Good morning.
In the last 4 months, there have been 2 knife attacks in London, one at Fishmongers Hall and the other in Streatham, blamed on Islamic extremism. Is your think tank meant to challenge some of the perceptions that those individuals were spouting?
Absolutely. I think what's important is that both Muslims and non-Muslims should understand that this type of egregious violence and terrorism and bloodletting has got nothing to do with Islam. It's a total distortion of true Quranic principles and teachings. And I think what's important is that this new think tank, the Oxford Institute for British Islam, is going to try to get Islam rooted in and relevant to this society, not to Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen or whatever. We need to naturalize and indigenize Islam to belonging to this society and to get rid of them and us. When these people do violence against our own citizens, it's because in their heads there is a them and us. And as long as there's them and us, we're going to have issues in the society.
But how has it happened? How has this them and us narrative happened? Is there a particular influence that you are going to take on?
Yes, absolutely. I think what most people need to understand are things like stoning to death, terrorism, violence, apostasy, blasphemy, lack of women's rights, no human rights, no human rights at all, and anti-gay policies. Actually, it's got nothing to do with true Quranic Islam. So there's a distinction in our minds between what the Quran teaches and what secondary sources has infiltrated into our faith. Now, what are these secondary sources? Now, you need to bear with me because these secondary sources have been able to subvert the pristine and uplifting message of the Quran, and we now have a toxic trio. I call it the terrible triplets of Islam. So what are these terrible triplets? Number one is the so-called Hadith. Now, Hadith are the supposed sayings of the Prophet Muhammad that were recorded some 300 years after his death. So in many ways, they are like Chinese whispers, not all, but many of them, and there's no absolute guarantee that this is actually what he said. So this is the first of the terrible triplets. The second is Sharia. Sharia, for both Muslims and non-Muslims, they need to understand that this is not God's law. Sharia is a concoction of medieval theological opinion masquerading as God's law. And then the third of the triplets is the fatwas. And the most egregious one of that is, of course, Khomeini's fatwa against Salman Rushdie. And fatwas is just an individual opinion of some cleric. And so this toxic combination of the Hadith, the sayings of Muhammad, the Sharia, supposed God's law, and these individual opinions of some cleric, these have actually subverted and distorted the true Islamic teachings of tolerance and mutual coexistence.
So that is important to understand, and thank you for explaining it. But who has done that?
Well, this has evolved over centuries. I mean...
But who right now in Britain... So, for instance, right. In Britain right now, if you are a young Muslim, and it tends to be young Muslim men, if you're a young Muslim man and you're going to get the memo that you've just described isn't correct about Islam, who are you getting it from, and who's countering it?
Well, we're getting it from the triple M's. We're getting from the Mosques, the Madrassas, and the Mullahs. Now, the mosques, we know these are the places of Muslim worship. The Mullahs are the supposed priests and leaders of these institutions, and the Madrassas are these Islamic schools that propagate these three terrible triplets into the minds of people. For example, they are taught that women are second class. Now, the Quran doesn't talk about second class. The Quran talks about differentiation. Now, differentiation means heads and tails of a coin are different, but they're absolutely equal. So, Quran recognizes that men and women have different roles, but they are equals. And I think this type of poison is coming from places like Saudi Arabia and Iran and so forth. What your listeners need to know is that the most prestigious mosque in the United Kingdom is the Regent's Park Mosque, which was in the news last week. And this mosque is controlled by the Saudis. The director in charge, is appointed by the Saudi king. His responsibility and answerability is to the Saudi monarch and not to British Muslims. Why is it that the most important and the most prestigious mosque is controlled by these backward fundamentalist Saudis who are spouting this poisonous theology of Wahhabism?
Well, I mean, first of all, they're not here to respond to what you're saying here, but my question then is, who regulates the mosques?
No one. This is
Why not?
Well, Islam has got both strength and weaknesses. The one great strength is that any community can start its own mosque. The great weakness is that they will go in all different ways. And that's why you will have people say, listen, it's fine to go and kill people. And if you kill someone, according to the Hadith, you will have 73 virgins, or 72 virgins waiting for you in heaven. And so we need to understand that there's the strength and this weakness. And what we need to do is to promote Quranic Islam. There's a difference between the Islam of the Quran and the Islam of the secondary human man-made sources that comes 300, 400, 500 years later.
So even if everybody listening to this radio programme right now accepted what you were saying to be factually the case as someone who is scholarly and has studied Islam, the reality is, if no one is regulating mosques in this country or any other, the cat's out the bag. You're not going to be able to do this, no offence, as the director of the Oxford Institute for British Islam, are you?
Yes, we are able to do it, because if mosques are existing as freewheeling places, why can't we exist? And
you could exist, but how are you going to do it?
Yeah, but we'll provide an alternative narrative. The point is, they've never been given an alternative narrative. They've been told that to be a good Muslim, you need to accept these three poisonous sources. We can prove to them from the Quran that this is not so. The Quran is very clear that only God's words count and not man-made concoctions.
But how are you, apart from obviously being on 5 Live, getting the message out there, how are you going to take it to these people?
Well, precisely, and that's why we have this institute manned by academics and scholars and so forth, and we will have a Journal of British Islam coming out shortly. We'll have lectures, classes, colloquiums, conferences, seminars, and taking the message to the people.
Are you going to go into the mosques that you know are rogue and say, hello, come over here?
No, that will be counterproductive. That will lead just to mindless violence. What we are doing is, firstly, we need to appeal to the thinking, tolerant Muslims. Now, we have about 4 million Muslims in this country. I would like to think, and I'm quite convinced of it, we have at least 10%, it's a small number, but at least 10% who are absolutely forward-looking and inclusive-minded Muslims. These are our first targets. We need to get movers and shakers from these people to show that, listen, there is an alternative, a valid alternative to Saudi Islam, a valid alternative to Pakistani Islam, a valid alternative to Wahhabi and other sort of poisonous Islams. We need to show that there is something. At the moment, who is dominating the agenda? It's all these fascists, theological fascists, Muslims who believe that violence is cool, Muslims who think that women are second class, that homosexuals should be killed and so forth.
So I could talk to you for hours, and I'm so interested in what you're saying. Can I ask 2 questions, just in terms of our time coming to a close together? Would you help us talk to some of these mosques and mullahs who are making these points and bring them together on the radio with you?
Absolutely. I think it's very important that we have this open dialogue. At the moment,
let's do that. The other question for you then is the Muslim Council of Britain completely without power?
Mainly, I think what's important is that they make these statements from time to time. They don't really tackle the root problems in our community. For example, we have an epidemic of drug dealing and sexual grooming. What have the Muslim Council Britain actually done about just those two things? Forget about violence and terrorism right now. Okay, what have they done about domestic violence in the Muslim community, drug dealing, and so forth? Platitudes are no good. Because, for example, the Hadith says it's okay for a Muslim man to marry someone at 9 years old because the Prophet Muhammad did that. Okay, and so they think that's fine, and it's okay for Muslim men to beat up women because apparently the Quran says so. By the way, the Quran doesn't say so. So all of these conventional popular views about Islam that has no real validity in the Quran is spouted as Islamic, and people who know nothing, in other words, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed is king. The Mullahs give them a censored version of Islam, and this version becomes the norm in our society.
If the Muslim Council of Britain are largely redundant then, and without power, and are allowing this to happen, is there no one who is presiding over British Islam right now who can bring it together in the way that you describe? I know you've got your effort now with this think tank, but is there a big hole in terms of power?
Absolutely, but I think the point is, who's going to fill this vacuum? The MCB, the Muslim Council of Britain, was a Blairite initiative, okay? And by the way, they only have Sunnis in their group. There are no Shias and other groups. In fact, you know, all of these different strands and branches of Islam are not represented in the Muslim Council of Britain. They project themselves as the leading group, but they don't have that power. And what's more important, what people should understand, that they are only reiterating the poison and the toxin that comes from Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so forth. We need an Islam that is relevant to this society. We need to cut the umbilical cord that links Islam supposedly to the Middle East and South Asia. We need to create an entirely British Islam that's tolerant, that's inclusive, that's pluralistic, and that wants to live with each other. As the Quran says, to you your religion, to me my religion. To you your way, to me my way. That's chapter 109, verse 6.
Are you worried about only attracting those who are ready to listen to this kind of message? Because actually the heart...
But that's where you begin. You can't begin with the masses. I mean, that is nonsensical. No,
but isn't this urgent? If people are taking to the streets with knives... I understand it's urgent, but no social movement begins with masses. I'm originally from South Africa, and then became immigrant, and I'm fully naturalized in this society. Apartheid started with a small group of people, anti-apartheid activities, and then it led to a crescendo. And similarly with this movement, we need to start small. And the idea is let's recruit thinkers and people who are independent-minded first, and not the masses. The masses will just follow whatever the most fiery clergyman can tell them. Do you think those sorts of imams that you're talking about, do you think they'll come on 5 Live with you and me?
Well, I don't know, but I think we should give that a try, because I think we need to take them on head on. Now, the problem is, for example, myself here in Oxford, the Oxford University has got an Islamic society in all these years, and I've been known as a progressive liberal Muslim who wants the burqa to be banned, the niqab to be banned. I've never been invited by the Oxford University Islamic Society. They do not wish to hear alternative views.
Well, let's get them on as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, you and I have got our work cut out. I'll be very interested to work with you, and our listeners are really enjoying what you're talking about in many different ways. I'll read out some of those messages in just a moment. The name of the person you've just been listening to there, Dr. Taj Hargey, Director of the Oxford Institute for British Islam. He's also the Imam of the Oxford Islamic Congregation. At long last, this is what we need, Emma. Please work with him.
Wearing a hijab does not make you a Muslim any more than wearing a hard hat makes you a builder. Did you know that what the Quran says and what most people believe are two different things? Unlike religion, Islam is not about an individual's quest for personal salvation, but a collective system for universal welfare and progress. This is not a new Islam. This is the way it should always have been. And now we have a reliable exposition of the Quran to explain this. The Quran New Millennium Exposition. A rendition that challenges traditional interpretations. The Quran, Muslims believe, is God's word and the final expression of his message to all people, whatever their belief, race or background. Others may not share this view but will recognize it as one of the world's most influential books. For this reason alone, it's worthy of study.